Abhishek, I really like to stay on kind of this talent segment and really think about how are we kind of segmenting into both the clinical and the non-clinical and thinking about the skills of the future. I know prompt engineering is a new skill that I've just started picking up on in the last year, now that we've got all kinds of crazy cool stuff with Chat GPT. But I'm teaching my 5-year-old right now how to use Chat GPT because I don't want him to fall behind. So help us think more about what kind of the skills of the future are going to be needed so that all of our clinicians can use this technology.
Yeah, so you bring out a very, very interesting point, right? So, how I would like to segment the skills market, right, would be split, like you said, between the clinical part and the non clinical part. In the clinical part, where you have your nurses and physicians, I believe that increasingly going forward, all clinicians and nurses need to become increasingly comfortable with technology, right? I believe that is also a skill that you're able to adapt to any technology that is given to you and you're able to take the benefits out of it. To my point earlier, when I talked about certain technologies like remote patient monitoring, telehealth, over there, now there is an incumbent need on the professionals on the clinical side to also update their skills with regards to data management as a whole as well, because through these technologies, you'll get loads and loads of data, but the analysis is still at the helm of the physician itself. Now, when I talk about the non clinical part of it, which is the administrative part of it, that is also a place where most of the hospitals and health enterprises are suffering from, like you said, burnout, because there is a lot of admin overload. And also at the same point in time, there are increasing costs that the healthcare enterprises are having to deal with, right? In that case as well, it is important for that non-clinical talent also to generate a nuanced set of skills, which also includes talking to a patient when they are just having, or if there is a request for scheduling. Also, at the same point in time, there is also an emphasis to have empathy when you are speaking to patients. One important thing that we know, especially during the COVID times as well, was an issue of mental health, right? So when a mental health person is calling to get the scheduling done, you want to be aware that he's dealing with some issues. You want to be empathy. You want to show empathy when you are speaking to them. So I would say now, while it is a domain-centric industry, right, but there's an increasing pivot towards having techno-domain skills. You need to be both good in technology and domain is obviously a given.
Awesome. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Right. So mental health has only continued to increase, and there's a lot of insight and data and science that shows us that this became really prevalent between like 2011 and 2015, and we really started to experience that with the kind of implementation of social media and all of the things that happen with our cell phones, right? So these little computer things that are so amazing have really started to kind of change our brains. And so now there's so many implications about what mental health crises look like, but it's also kind of changing the game too. Abhishek, what I loved about what you said is that you talked about this meta skill. I think having empathy and being able to have conversations with humans is now a meta skill, right? Whereas before we would have been able to know how to have a conversation, but I think people get really courageous behind their cell phones and on screens. And then when it comes to humans, there's this fine art. Like we used to call them soft skills. I still call them human skills because it is really important that we know how to actively listen to somebody and not listen to respond, but listen to actually hear what the person is saying and really truly feel what they're feeling. And that's something that healthcare professionals typically do so beautifully. But I think they're also facing too, maybe even actually not maybe even, they are, the incivility also too, even from the patient and the patient's families or the environments, right? So I think about safety on both angles, right? So I just remember back to even when my grandmother was hospitalized back in 2002 and 2003, and there were a lot of her nurses that they were on their like second double shift, or they were on like demanded overtime. And so you see these nurses who are just trying to love their patients well, but they're just mentally exhausted. And there is only so much from a resiliency perspective, too, that you can expect the human brain to be able to take on.